Let's see if we're on there. Let's see if we show up in there.
I show that it says that we're live.
Okay. Okay. I do not see us, but let's see. Hopefully somebody can tell us if we're live. Can someone tell us if we're live?
I can see you.
Oh, you see us online?
I see you.
Oh. Okay, great. Well, that's awesome. So let me actually see if I can minimize this and pull up our presentation. Let's see. There we go. Cancel. All right, we're here. You see me, right?
Yes,
No,
I see you.
great. Oh, all right. Hopefully you see us both like side by side right now. Yay.
Yes. It's really interesting. We can't really see ourselves. So
no, we can't, but hopefully we can, somebody can see if they can see us online. That would be great. Oh, yep, here we are. Okay, great. All right. Thank you everybody for your patience with us and technology. There were some major thunderstorms here over in the DC area. Luckily for Dr. Sonda's sake, she's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I don't think there were any like crazy sandstorms or things for you or tornadoes or anything. But for us, it was like derecho land here. So thank you for coming tonight. I'm going to be sharing the screen in a moment. But first, I thought I would just make sure to introduce my co-hostess extraordinaire. And her name is Dr. Sonda Powell, a great friend of mine. So sad that we couldn't see each other this year at our annual retreat due to extenuating circumstances from COVID precautions. But I'm so thrilled to have her be my co-host this evening talking about biohacking the spectrum, because we're both passionate pediatric and prenatal chiropractors. She's been in practice for a little over 15 years, married, has 3 really adorable children. Her youngest, Annika, I met when she was just barely 1. And she practices in downtown like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and has a thriving practice working with children and grownups too, but on the sensory spectrum and on just neurodevelopmental challenges in general and so forth. And we are passionate about this work. The two of us have done extended amount of studying to be able to care for our patients in this special way. And as you'll hear us interject throughout our presentation this evening, which probably won't be exactly 30 minutes, it might be closer to 40 minutes. A, we have the gift of gab, and B, this topic is vast. But we are, currently even still in additional training, especially due to the circumstances that are surrounding us at this time. So we are coming to you from a chiropractic lens as pediatric and prenatal chiropractors, as moms, and as biohackers. We fully have dug into the beauty of what happens when you turn on your body's own innate healing powers using a biohack called nutrigenomics, using the power of nutrition to affect your gene expression. So I'm going to share the screen. Fingers crossed, technology behaves, and I'm going to have Sonda just kind of start us off a little bit. Let's see. All right, let's see if everybody can see us. All right, now of course my cursor is missing. See, I knew this was going to happen. Please pray. There we go. I can open up PowerPoint. All right. All right, let's see. So far, so good. At least we're looking at, oh, did you see that light flicker? Oh no. Lord, please. Let's see.
Not tonight, Kat. Not tonight.
Not tonight. Not tonight, Satan. We
That's
are
right.
not having that start. File, slideshow. Play from the start. There. So we're going to do a little introduction here. Here's our pretty picture. There you have it. Go ahead, take the floor a little bit there, Dr. Sanda, and give us an idea of kind of what we'll be covering all over the place tonight.
So I don't know about you, Kat, but I'm, starting to hear patients coming in and talking more about what their schools are doing, and just how everybody's kind of having to pivot what their family has been doing. And what I really find is that kids on the spectrum, or with sensory processing, because really we're kind of interchangeably talking about that, because a kid that has sensory processing can also be on the spectrum, or it could simply just be that they struggle with other things like ADD, a little OCD. There's so many things that can be affecting them. And so really that's what we're here to talk about, is just the similarities that happen within those groups. And as chiropractors, we really can't diagnose these disorders, but we can definitely work with them because it affects our nervous system, and our nervous system is really what's in control of all of this. So that's really the standpoint that I come at, any of this from, is that. And some of the things that we had talked about was, kids are going to have to be spaced out, or at least here, that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to keep the kids spaced out, 6 feet apart. I don't know about you, but there's not very many kids that might have what we would consider normal functioning, that can stay 6 feet apart. Kids like to be together. They want to come together. So these sensory issues that kids have, a lot of times they don't know how to keep space apart from each other. So that might be a challenge that parents are facing. Kids having to wear masks over their face. They're going to be touching them, and how much is that going to be affecting just how they move their mouth? How are they going to interact with each other socially? And how is that going to also affect them being able to read other kids, their teachers? These are all things that we need to be talking to our kids about, and understanding that we're going to have to go off body language. And but a lot of these kids aren't going to be able to even, I don't want to say understand that, but definitely a child on the spectrum is going to struggle with that more.
Totally. So I think, like, from coming from our perspective as biohackers and chiropractors and parents, we already know that, like, kids being kids on the normal or neurotypical side of things are going to have challenges with all of this stuff. Now we're adding on an extra layer of just like a collective stress. And we're going to be talking predominantly about biohacking, and just a little bit of explanation of what exactly, as best as we can, what our analysis is when we're trying to check kids out, and also what really the senses are, right? But what you can do as a parent, in addition to the above, like certain exercises, seeking out pediatric chiropractors and OTs, and we're looking for always optimal. That's the thing that differentiates chiropractic a lot of the time, is we're looking for optimal function, not necessarily function versus no function, but optimal. So something, I know that we're both what we coined, or our mentor has coined, Dr. Monica Berger coined, brain-based chiropractors, and thought we would wow you with some of the interesting facts about the brain. Let's see if I have my little booklet so I can read it. I know it's not the best picture. You'll have to forgive me, but this is such cool stuff, and about our amazing brains. So let's see here. See if I have any glasses. So the first part says there, in early pregnancy, our nerve cells, neurons, develop at a mind-staggering rate of 250,000 neurons per minute. That means that at birth we have, it looks like 100 billion nerve cells in the brain. If you were to stack 100 billion pieces of paper on top of each other, that stack would be about 8,000 kilometers high. That's the distance from Sydney to Tokyo, a 10-hour flight. So that's how many neurons, nerve cells we're born with. And think about all the ways that we're killing them, right? The number of connections between the nerve cells increases from 50 trillion to 1 quadrillion during the first month of life. So already at this early stage of life, there are more connections in the baby's brains than there are in stars in the known universe. So if your baby's body size increased at the same rate, your 4-kilo newborn baby would weigh 80 kilos at 1 month of age. So it's a good thing our brains are at a different rate than our bodies. The brain has this amazing capacity for doing something called pruning. It uses cells called microglial cells. Underused or overused connections, or unused or underused connections between nerve cells will basically affect us in one way or the other. So in an older child, an adult will actually have fewer connections between the neurons than a baby. However, the connections and the pathways that are used will get bigger and faster and have better protection and therefore function more efficiently. This pruning system that the body does is affected in a sensory challenge or a sensory defensive child. And then pathways in the brain are constructed by nerve cells, do similar tasks. They bunch together. We often say nerves that fire together wire together. And this is a theory called neuroplasticity. And the way our nerves receive protection and insulation is from like a fatty covering. That's the glia that I was talking about, that roll around them, myelinate them, similar to kind of like plastic around the electrical cord. And that helps increase the speed of nerve message transmission. So it's really fascinating. They transmit messages at speeds up to 119 meters per second. The adult brain weighs about 2% of our total body weight, but uses 20% of the body's energy and oxygen. And then here's the last cool thing. The brain receives 2 million messages per second, and we are consciously aware of only 7. 2 million messages per second, and we're consciously aware of only 7. That is so incredible. Is there anything you want to add about our incredible brain or neuroplasticity or neural pruning?
Well, I think that to really summarize that, like, the way I always think of it is our brain is constantly deciding what it needs and doesn't need. And so that's really that pruning is if we're not practicing what we're doing, then we kind of lose that because our brain says, oh, we don't need that information anymore. But we also have more what I think of like hard tracks where, like we might not ride a bike for a while, but we can hop right back on the bike and do that. And it's because our muscles and our brain and our ligaments and everything else have really came together to form that hard pathway in our brain. But if we have any type of injury to the brain, then obviously we can lose that track. This is kind of what we see like in stroke patients and stuff like that. So they have to relearn how to do that. But once again, through neuroplasticity, we're able to repattern the brain to doing that again. So really, I think it's just amazing stuff that we can do.
So incredible. And that is why like my focus has always been on the brain and like what happens before and what happens after birth and all of that critical period and sensitive period. So one theory that's out there about how the brain is divided is the theory of the triune brain. And it looks a little bit like like a fist. And we have a reptilian brain, which is focused on survival, a limbic brain, which is more like emotions and empathy. And then we have a neocortex, which is our thinking brain, our human brain, our logic, our abstract thoughts, reading, writing, math, and all that stuff. And what we're seeing actually increasingly, especially now during things like COVID and some of the distancing and some of just the dissonance of being able to like rectify in our heads like how we are enduring all of these changes that are going down, is that we're stuck in that reptilian brain and more of a primitive brain. And being in a primitive brain, you often won't be able to go beyond and integrate your primitive reflexes that you're born with to keep you alive, your survival, like your parachuting, like Moro reflex, or rooting reflex, or palmar reflex, or any of the reflexes that are really designed to help you even go through the birth process itself. And people are either not integrating them by the age of 1 or so, or they're kind of coming back out because they're under incredible amounts of stress. So when we're talking about the brain, we're actually thinking about which part of the brain is on overload, and it can be on overload for a lot of reasons, which we'll touch on. I'm going to let Dr.
I think
Sonda.
I
Well,
think
go
the
ahead.
other thing that we didn't mention in that picture is the amygdala. And our amygdala is
Right
constantly
there.
scanning for threat. And so a lot of us are in, and it scans for threat every 3 seconds. So with that, like it's constantly trying to figure out, are we safe? Are we okay? So, whenever all of this first started, I really feel like everybody's cortisol cranked up. Like we really went into more of that flight or fight response. And as chiropractors, we talk about that all the time, how we can adjust the spine and affect the nervous system, taking someone out of that flight or fight response. So I find it, really helpful that we can do that. And in talking about little kids sense and they go off of their parents. So if parents are in a fear and paralysis mode, then we're going to expect these kids to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much like what you were talking about, the amygdalas in that limbic system. They're in limbic lock and load, and
Yep.
it's affecting and what we call flipping off their prefrontal cortex, which is what's responsible for like executive function or sensory processing and all that stuff. And it's fascinating to see what's happening. Like not fascinating always 100% positively, but also like eek. So let's see if I can. Okay, so since our original kind of topic is on the sensory processing aspect, or the sensory spectrum, if you will, I think it's always really cool and neat for people to hear and learn about the fact that there are more than just those 5 senses. And some books actually even say that we have 7, but our experience is that we actually have 8 senses that require a properly functioning nervous system, require our bodies to be able to go through the process of the pruning, et cetera. So I would love to have you, Dr. Sonda, explain a little bit more about all of these 8 senses. And I don't think we have the time this evening to talk about which parts of the brain all of these are related to, but I think helping people to understand where people can be dysregulated and which sensory systems they can be dysregulated and how it'll show up.
Yeah. So our 5 near senses that most people understand and know about are our olfactory, which is our nose, tactile, what we feel, that can be just what our clothing and things like that are. That's why we're more drawn to certain types of clothing. Then we have our gustatory, which would be taste. That could also and tactile. Believe it or not, we can have gustatory and tactile at the same thing in the mouth, because we're actually taking in the texture of food. So something might taste good to somebody, but it doesn't. The texture isn't right. Like my husband loves blackberries, but he can't stand the texture of all the seeds. So that would be an example. And then we have auditory, auditory processing, taking things in through the ears, and then our visual system, which I always tell patients that we can have a visual processing issue that is not telling us that we can't see it's more that we're taking in, how an object is moving towards us and how our brain reacts to that, more than if we can actually like see 20/20. It's more how our visual system takes in and works with those other systems, such as our vestibular system. So our vestibular system is responsible for balance and coordination. Where are we in space? And then that one has to work really well with our proprioception. So proprioception is even more, where is our body in space? And how do we move fluidly through that? And we get that information coming in to our joints. So this could be why, kids need to get up and move around the classroom instead of just sitting still, or they might, wobble and move a lot, is they're looking for proprioceptive input that actually causes the brain to be more calm. And then interoception is more of an internal awareness. And I would describe this as kind of like, it can affect you. Like, let's say somebody comes up and kind of scares you and gets that internal, like, what just happened to me? But that also affects our gut and our digestive system too. So we very much can send off a chemical reaction that's happening that increases cortisol, affects our digestion. And really how all of these work together, the way I see it, you were talking about the primitive reflexes. And some of these reflexes that we have in early childhood from that primitive brain are there for survival. And so we're tying all these sensory systems together. And as children start going through development, they start getting these a little bit more heightened, or they start decreasing how they're affected by those. So, but all of these systems work together. And so if they're not working together, or if they have misalignment or interference within their spine and their nervous system, we can see a lot of dysregulation that happens.
Totally. I think that is a really like amazing way to put it, that they can be dysregulated. We know that, some kids have a lot of trouble with the sensory information coming into their brain, and that's why movement and sleep and adjustments and sunshine and, love and yoga and all that stuff is so important. And if they are sensing from inside their body, or the information of the world around them isn't coming in kind of straight, if you will, this leads them to overwhelm. And as adults, overwhelm might show up as anxiety or depression. But when a child's experiencing, they may want to try to, they might have avoidant behavior. That's why we call it sometimes sensory defensiveness, right? They might have avoidant behaviors, or some kids seem like they can't get enough, right? Like there's that hyper, and then there's the hypo. There's people that are going to be seeking. Some people have to have movement and noise. And I think the important thing to know here is that we all have some level of this, like some people are a little more sensitive, like hyperacusis, like sounds, or when I'm really, really tired or really stressed, or my adrenals are really shot, someone flips on a light switch and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? But when things are integrated, I'm okay. But there's definitely hypersensory and hyposensory, and those are on both sides of the spectrum.
Well, and I think too, the important thing to realize is a lot of kids will use these different senses to calm their brain, and a lot of people don't realize that that's what they're doing. I always remember, I remember as a kid, I got in trouble because whenever I was sitting at my desk, I was constantly moving my legs and kicking them back and forth. And they tell me to quit, and I just couldn't. Well, it was because I was trying to like get that input into my body so that I could feel calm, so that I could think and do my work. And I didn't even know that I was doing it. But that's where the brain connected to the rest of my body saying, hey, we need some input, or we're gonna crash. We're not, you can't think straight. So I think a lot of times, they're looking for that. They might even be in the classroom and they're chewing on a pencil, or, or maybe there's a strong smell in the room that's irritating them or bothering them, like a Glade plug-in or something like that. Those type of things are really, yeah. We'll talk about chemicals in a little bit. But anyway, so, those things are really going to affect certain people because it's going to trigger that olfactory, it's going to trigger that proprioceptive system. Or it could be that they're using that system to go into a more calm and relaxed state so that they can think and process.
Awesome. Awesome. So, just kind of a little bit of a summary and a slightly different visual. Outside world enters our inside world through our body and our nervous system. The peripheral nerves take the info to the spinal cord. It goes then to the brain via nerve tracts. Over arousal can be excess, stuff, and then under arousal would just be insufficient. So you might catch a child who, like you were saying, Sonda, that you had to kick a bench. There's some kids who have to stick their tongue out. And
yeah, as they're writing.
As they're writing or coloring, it's like an overflow movement or an outflow movement. And basically, just like this summary was just really great. I loved it. Sensory integration or sensory processing is when there's a dysfunction in the way the nerve system receives messages from the senses, turns them into responses. So whether you're eating chicken nuggets, sitting in a class, listening to the teacher, or coloring with a crayon, your successful completion of the activity requires processing sensation or sensory feedback. And a lot of it is what we get through movement in our feet and what we hear and what we see. And when we start, using screens exclusively, or we put children in very restrictive situations, like I'm fearful for what we're going to actually see, to be honest. And we're going to probably end up seeing a lot of medicated children as well. And it's really not the solution. We need to move our bodies to integrate our nervous systems. So let's see. One of these graphics, I'll just go over this real quick, that we use in our training. We've learned to kind of assess, and you can do this yourself. I can actually add it as a picture in the comments and maybe upload it. Our mentor created this. How are you? And the A is one thing, R is two things, and the E is three things. So asking yourself, adaptation wise, what's my total body burden and how am I having to adapt to my environment? And that's, the 5 external senses and the 3 internal senses. Resilience and rate limiting. How resilient are you under a constant burden of stress, which right now we're under a constant burden of stress. The nervous system can lose its resiliency and lead to immune compromise and the breakdown of all body systems. And I think that's important to hear because our neural system controls our immune system, does through with like the vagus nerve. And that has that's a whole other story. But our vagus nerve is really what we're talking about here. Rate limiting, abnormal adaptation can result in being held in captivity by the amygdala that you were mentioning before, and the fear mongerer part of our limbic brain will get stuck in that, like, who's out to get me? Is this real? Is this fake? Is this not real? Oh my gosh, and so we're prevented from living at our fullest potential. So it's a rate limiting factor in life. And then lastly, which is sometimes what only 1 or 2 people focus on, is maybe just the environment or just the expression. But we have our environment will shape our experience. And that's really like a lot to do with epigenetics, how we can change our gene expression. And that's a positive thing by our environment, but we can also do really deleterious things too. Our experiences determine our expression, and our expression, a person's life expression, is the result of them trying to adapt to their environment. So for instance, a hypersensitive patient responds to sensory input with fear avoidance behaviors, and hyposensitive patients respond with risk-taking behaviors. And the things that are important in your sensory experience are what you're exposed to: traumas, toxins, thoughts, technology, and I always add tethers, because scar tissues and restrictions really reduce our body's ability to express itself. I think this is a really cool image too. Thank you to Dr. Dorte Blatt, who has done some work with creating a program called Switched On Kids that I really, really love. And I have some of her books available in my office that are like these little magazine booklets for patients. And I think this, what, if you can't see it very well, at the very top, it says reading, writing, and math. And that's higher learning, but there's so much basic stuff that has to happen before you can do higher learning. And so, Sonda, do you want to talk a little bit about what this means for you and for people who are listening?
Yeah, so I actually, you talked about adding the other T, tethers. And so I see a lot of infants and babies for tether oral tissue. And so, the way that I see this is it starts at birth. It actually starts preconception. But most people can really see this graphic more so starting at birth. And so, if we look at that bottom level where it says sense of touch, vestibular, proprioception, sense of movement, um, babies come out of the womb and they have to open up that tissue. Their body starts taking in all of this other sensation and movement. The way I explain it to my patients is we have to start, we don't start tummy time at 3 months. We start tummy time, doing it skin to skin, which would be touch. They start moving around on the parents. They start taking in all that information, and we start to develop the vestibular system, which the vestibular system and the proprioceptive system, proprioception, like if I'm having a baby that's having difficulty with nursing, a lot of times I'll tell the mom to add some pressure to the baby's feet because that gives them that proprioceptive input into the joints and the baby can calm down and is better able to nurse. So if we miss any of these foundational steps, then you could see that we could have trouble with balance, coordination. Their visual system isn't going to develop right because the visual system is tied to being able to balance and coordinate. So, the visual system always wants to stay level with the horizon. And so if we're walking around and we don't have any good sense of gait, where we're actually going, then it's going to throw our vision system off too. So you can see how, then we keep going up and we see that maybe they have more of one side moving than the other. That could be from birth trauma. I just actually got in seeing a baby tonight that was born with its arm up above its head as it came through the birth canal. So,
Wow.
we can see birth trauma playing a role in here. A midline restriction, such as a tether oral tie from the midline. The baby's not going to be able to get that that tongue to the roof of the mouth, which really signals to the brain where we are in the middle. Like, believe it or not, that actually helps with our balance and coordination. So if we start out not developing these things, then we can see that just one level being affected could greatly affect reading, writing, math, how we remember things, even having a sense of rhythm. I mean, it's just a ripple effect, and it really starts, I think, from preconception
Totally.
and into birth. And if we're not working with these babies and everything else, then we're going to see that these sensory systems aren't going to be developing like they need to. And so if they don't develop correctly, then this is where we get, that older kid that is struggling in the classroom. They can't sit still like the teacher wants them to. They might have some auditory issues. It's so all connected, and there's so much we can do. So I work more on the infant side, but because I see infants, I also see older kids from these families, and I see the effects from one child to the next. And so I work with those older kids too, but my main focus is really teaching parents how to avoid these issues later in life. And that's what I think we have to really start focusing on, as well as helping the kids to have difficulty now.
Totally. My focus has always been like yours, fixing people before they're conceived, which is like my motto. But one of the reasons why I'm passionate also, yes, obviously we're passionate about chiropractic, and But one of the things that's hard to do is it being financially accessible to other people, or right now during COVID, a lot of people were afraid to go out. But so this is where using a tool like biohacking, which isn't the only thing that should be done, but imagine if the mom's anxiety or the pain is decreased and she can move more when she's pregnant, and that helps the balance in the vestibular system to form in the baby. Or if her cortisol doesn't change so high, then she won't have an anxious baby be born. So it's pretty fascinating because, like, us being able to kind of care for the mom beforehand, before she even conceives, this is where, optimizing the expression of the genes, one with chiropractic and nervous system focus, another with nutrigenomics. If we can help somebody to have a better lifestyle before they conceive, while they're pregnant, have a better experience of birth, because they aren't, like, for instance, in excruciating pain when they're delivering, because they have been doing these things that we recommend. And we have found recently that by using biohacking, that it has increased the positive experience of our patients on these fronts. One of the tools that I hand out to some of my patients, to my patients, all of them, is this, and it has two sides, I believe. I don't always keep track of these things, but watching for milestones. And what does that have to do with it? Well, one of the reasons why they have those pediatrician visits, there are multiple reasons why there are pediatrician visits, but staying on topic, one of the reasons why is for milestone checks. And my practice, when babies don't have an overt issue, I'm checking them at times of milestones, because we want to make sure that they're doing these various things, because missing a milestone is a red flag. This is where mom's innate intuition is what I respect more than anything. There is no doctor on the planet who knows your baby better than the one you gestated yourself. And I feel that sometimes it's kind of swept under the rug. It's a little bit of a frustrating source for myself and Dr. Sonda. But having a kind of a little chart where you can be like, ooh, you know what? They do all that, but they can't actually lift their head by 90 degrees at 4 months. What's going on in there? And that's where we can kind of catch issues before this child ends up getting a label. Any thoughts there, Doc?
Yeah, exactly. I always, so I had a patient the other day that came in. I said, how is tummy time? As a new patient, and she said, oh, it's great. She loves being on her tummy. And so I'm assessing the child, and then I see that the child never lifts her head up off of my lap. And so, yeah, she was 3 months old, and so her ideal tummy time was just the fact that she could tolerate being on her tummy. She didn't understand that that actually meant getting her head up and back and into that 90-degree angle. And so we talked about it, and she said, oh, well, she doesn't like to do that. So I showed her some ways of getting her to do tummy time. And she came back a week later, and I mean, the child just, mom was like, she's nursing better, she's sleeping better, like all these things. She tolerated her car seat better. I mean, it's amazing how you start feeding that brain that information, and we see all kinds of things start to happen.
So amazing. I love it. So these are some of the top things that we're looking at when we're, evaluating, and things that are related actually to how you express your environment, the oxidative stress that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Is tied into the toxins in the environment. It's the free radical damage from everything, including your diet. Maybe your reflexes aren't integrating. Maybe your alignment is off. Maybe you've had, torticollis when you were younger, or you have tethers or tongue tie. Maybe you're not hitting milestones. Heart rate variability, telling us a little bit how your vagus nerve is functioning, how you are processing the world. I know that I'm passionate about this, and Dr. Sonda is too, the birth process itself, but, the mom's pregnancy, the ease of conception. We are always asking questions about how the baby was conceived, how was the pregnancy, how was the delivery, and so forth, because there is a possibility of accumulation. So anything you want to say there before we transition into kind of like the biohacking side of specifically, so that people can have a little bit of a view of the biohacking side of this.
Yeah. You know, I always tell patients that we all have a bucket, and we walk around with that bucket. And if you look at this list that you have up, then how full is our bucket? And with my back pain patient, I talk about inflammation, and then our back pain, like we never had an issue, but then suddenly we do. Well, our bucket ran over. So the same thing can be said with a child on the spectrum. It can be said with a sensory processing child too, or a baby that's struggling. Is we all have a bucket, and every single one of these things can go into our bucket. And even if we just have one of these things, one small thing, environmental toxins, then we eat bad food like the pizza that you just showed. The reflexes, misalignment in the spine, like that bucket is just going to keep getting fuller and fuller, and eventually it's going to overspill. And our bucket, we want to keep our bucket as low as we can. And if we can't keep our bucket low enough, then this is where we see outward expression of our body not functioning how it needs to. So whether or not it's sensory processing or it's chiropractic, our bucket is just full. And I feel like right now everybody's bucket is really full. So we have to have ways to mitigate that. And there's just so many different ways that we can do that.
Totally. So one of the ways that we're passionate about is biohacking. But first, let's see how we're being hijacked daily, kind of as a summary, like some of the things we just said. But repetition is the mother of all skill and learning. Heavy metals, minerals, pesticides, poor diet. So in our food and water, our environment, pollution, household cleaners, beauty products, mold, maybe even Lyme, Epstein-Barr. There are lots of different viruses and things in our environment. Personally, and our relationships, poor sleep, stress. Stress should be like in capitals, exclamation point, exclamation point. Inactivity, overworked, alcohol, smoking, and so forth, like lack of exercise and technology. We are definitely, this is something that's a huge problem for children is screens. And we talk a lot about this with our patients, but overstimulation, blue light, EMFs, the instant gratification, the dopamine hits that people get when they get the likes on their posts, or the kids, looking at TikTok videos, depression, etc. And most people don't know this, but did you know that 85,000 chemicals have been introduced since the Industrial Revolution? And so many of these are actually present sadly, in the umbilical cord blood of newborns. It's incredible how toxic our environment is. And one of the reasons why I think is one of the biggest sources, which is why I see so many changes with my patients, one of the biggest sources is toxin trauma, is the trauma of having, an adverse reaction to the toxins in our environment. And that leads to our body, especially if we have challenges with certain detoxification enzymes in our body, we are not detoxifying. We are not able to, because we're depleted in one of our antioxidants in our body called glutathione. So, what you can do your best to eliminate the toxins. And for the most part, this is simply just life in this century, right? It's good to have the good makeup and the good cleaning products and all that stuff. But, like when 95 different hand sanitizers are being called, like harmful in the past few weeks, you have to kind of ask yourself, like, what world we're living in. So all of this is dimming our lights. And as chiropractors, we talk a lot about dimming the light switch. Our lights are a little bit dimmer, but we can turn them on. So here's what's happening in our bodies when the light's dimming. We have oxidative stress, which is basically cellular trash. Mitochondrial decline, which means our energy, our powerhouse in our cells are dying. We have a decrease in sirtuin activity, which is basically the CEO of our cells, which tells our cells what to do to not become cancerous, to not do this, to not do that. Our metabolism is slowing down, etc. So what this all does is it means decreased immune system, brain fog, bad mood, lack of motivation, sluggishness, increased stress, weight gain, and fatigue. These are some of the symptoms, but imagine what are some of the similar symptoms with somebody on the spectrum. Um,
I don't know about you, Kat, but I'm seeing a
tell
lot
me.
of those symptoms in our young kids.
Yes,
Like 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 this picture is of an adult, but I see the same stuff in kids, you
yes.
know.
I'm seeing
I mean,
older kids, like when they're young, I'm seeing babies being born with like the problems of old people.
well, like here locally, I mean, I see kids that are 8 years old and they're struggling with obesity.
Yeah,
And it has to do with their diet, their lifestyle. They're not exercising, they're how they view themselves, and it's just they're doing poorly in school, they're barely making it. I mean, it's just really sad that we're seeing all of these things affecting the kids.
totally. So the company that we are partnered with asked themselves, since the body already has natural abilities to address oxidative stress, mitochondrial decline, sirtuin activity, and more, can we manipulate those abilities? Is there a way to flip the switch and activate those genes? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Oh, where is that? Yes, I love that answer. Yes. so so let's talk about these we're going to talk about two of the three theories, because these are the two main products that we use in our product that practices that are different than other products than we've ever used. Oxidative stress is basically the damage to the cell integrity. It is our body's supposed to be producing antioxidants, but it slows down over time. And we want to be able to turn that process on, like the innate healing process. So there's a switch for that, and it's called the NRF2 gene. It's the responsible gene for antioxidant production in our own body. Glutathione is one of those antioxidants. If you look at the current literature as to what is happening in current events, you will see that glutathione upregulation and the NRF2 gene upregulation is a critical component in our health. So our product is called Protandem. If you have never heard of this is your first time hearing about NRF2 activation, type NRF2 into the comments, and we will make sure that the person who shared the information or shared this presentation with you gets you information on this product. And it's clinically shown to lower oxidative stress by 40% in 30 days. That basically is akin to a fire hydrant or a fire hose in every room of your proverbially burning down house, rather than a Dixie cup of water on a house fire. So this is what it looks like. And some of the literature out there is just incredible. NRF2 is likely to be considered the most important health promoting approach in the foreseeable future. It may become the most extraordinary breakthrough in the history of health, which is so cool to think about NRF2 activation like this. Dr. Sonda has a really cool story to share. I'm going to save my story for our mitochondrial product, but this is her one of her cool stories about NRF2 activation that she's used in her practice.
So I had a little boy, and he he's he went dark. His switch flipped after his 18-month well child check, and so anyway, he's been nonverbal. He is autistic, and so last summer I began talking to his parents a little bit about what this was doing, and I've always wanted to give him, get him more glutathione because he shows heavy metals. He's got all kinds of, bowel issues, yeast. Obviously he's also, nonverbal, so there's, brain is not connecting to be able to formulate speech. And so they agreed. They looked at the research and they said, this looks safe, let's try it. And so when they did, I was actually in Idaho, where we usually retreat in July, And the mom sent me a picture, and it was very similar to this picture. And what it was Harry's always taken the cars and just lined them up, like on a windowsill or on the table. And he went over and they had this carpet on their floor. And Harry started putting the cars lined up outside of the garage. And his mom sent me a picture of that. And it was very similar to what this little child is doing. And he had the cars lined up outside the garage. And she said that he was actually driving them on the path and doing pretend play. So Harry is 5. So we should see that a child is doing this at about the age of, 2.5 to 3, mirroring and mimicking that. And so Harry was 5, almost 6 before he even really started doing that. And since last summer, he's even started formulating more sentences. We've seen that the other day he was in the office, and if he didn't get his way, he'd throw himself on the ground and kind of rebel to what he wanted to do. And the other day he started to do that, and his mom said, Harry, it's time for us to leave. We have to put the toys back. And he started to, and then he just stopped. He's like, okay. And he got up and no fit, no tantrum, and walked out of the room. It's been amazing. I've had very similar results with several of my other kids, and you can probably talk a little bit more about what happens there, but they're taking this, and what I think is happening is we're taking that load off of their nervous system.
Yes.
We're increasing glutathione, we're taking away the oxidative stress. Their body's able to handle that toxic load that's there. So
you're right. We're detoxing better because we're upregulating that glutathione, and it's really incredible when you switch on that switch. Oh my God.
And I think the other thing is we're upregulating that glutathione, but we're doing it in the body's like check and balancing it as it's doing it. So we're not going to get too much. We're really, it's just helping our body to do what it naturally should be doing anyways.
That's awesome. So basically, and I knew we were going to be like long-winded. Next, we began to look at the switch for mitochondrial health and the mitochondria decline, as we get older. And the body's constantly trying to fix it and produce new mitochondria, and that also slows down over time. And there's a switch called the NRF1 pathway, and it's responsible for mitochondrial biogenesis. And the company created a product with, acetyl L-carnitine and grapeseed extract, and created a product that helps turn on the production of new mitochondria. And this isn't about mitochondrial disease. That's a very small, rare thing, but a large part of the population has mitochondrial dysfunction. And my story is with my son. It's hard to see here, but he's 2 here in this picture on the left, and he was 19 pounds when we were away. And in the middle, I did a screenshot of a video. He used to do choreoform movements, and then a picture of us kinesiotaping his legs because of mitochondrial tone issues. And then he had trouble gaining weight for a little while. And when we started NRF2, it was a game changer for sure. And that's a long story. But when I turned on NRF1 pathway in his body, he was able to gain weight and have a better posture. And his child is extremely close to neurotypical. Like most people wouldn't know there was a challenge. So the approach of this company really is basically antioxidant production with Protandim, with turning on our body's ability to do it itself. So one thing that's really cool is you can Google, go to pubmed.gov, which is the National Institutes of Health Library of Medicine, and you can find so much information about Protandim, our flagship product itself. And it's so exciting to have the opportunity to get to talk with a friend. And we hope that this has been beneficial for you. We are super, super passionate about it. And just know that for us to be here partnered with this company, we have vetted it. We have used it in ourselves, in our children, our families, and we recommend it with good conscience to our patients, knowing that it probably accelerates their healing. So just know that science has already discovered that our genes has this incredible ability to keep our bodies healthy. So thanks for your time and attention. Reaching out to intersectforlife.org is for a chiropractor in your area who could help with sensory defensive children. Reaching out to the person who introduced you to this group for how to start your biohacking journey. Download HRV apps so you can check your heart rate variability, see if you're in flight or fight. You probably already know that you are, if you are. Do some yoga, get some sunshine, be outside, minimize screens, get blue light blockers. The list is really endless, but most importantly, consider biohacking to help slow down the aging process and heal your cells. So, any last words, Dr. Sanda?
No, we're here to help, and just, I feel very fortunate to be able to make these recommendations, to my patients, and to, like you said, use it on myself and my family. And I know both of us have had tremendous results in healing from experiencing the product too. So just, I appreciate you asking me to come on and talk tonight, and it's been fun.
Ditto. All right. I'm going to stop the recording. All right. Mwah. Love you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.